Hi, this is Michael Becker, and in this lesson of Tinderbox, we're going to talk about probably the second, third, fourth most fundamental thing you need to learn about Tinderbox, and that's attributes. So let's just jump right in and we'll talk about it. So in previous lessons, we talked about how to go about creating notes and how to go about creating prototypes. So I'm not going to review those here. So I'm just going to start doing stuff, and then I'm going to show you attributes. So as we noted before, you can simply click on a note and start typing. This is my note. Maybe I want to hit the enter key, which allows me to automatically create another note, and I'm going to call this note Identity Praxis, which is the name of my company. We'll create another note. We'll call this one Eastgate. Let's hit the enter key and we'll create another note. We'll give it my name, Michael Becker. So we have a handful of notes here. We have just a general note. This is my note. We have another note, Identity Praxis. And we have another note called Eastgate. And we have another note called Michael Becker. So we have four different notes, and there are four different concepts here. Now we want to be able to apply meta information, insight, and ideas about these particular notes. Such as where do I live, or what's my email address, and those are that type of meta information is what is referred to as an attribute. Now, attributes play a really super important role in Tinderbox because what attributes not only allow us to apply information to a note, they actually allow us to provide information that Tinderbox will actually use to be able to do its thing, to be what Tinderbox is all about. So that's a really important concept to understand. The other thing to think about is when you're considering this idea of an attribute, please, please, please remember this. Every note has every attribute that is in the system. Whether or not that attribute is displayed or whether or not the attribute has a value is the only thing that really matters. So if you create an attribute or if there's a system attribute, every note has every attribute. Whether or not that note's displayed or has a value is up for grabs, if you will. It depends on really what you're doing. So now let me give you some practical examples of attributes. Now, there are system attributes and there are user-generated attributes. And let me show you what system attributes look like. Now, the easiest way for me to be able to show you those system attributes, let me do that here. And I'm going to right mouse click on this note and say Get Info. And when I get info, this note management pop-up window appears. Now, by the way, here's a little trick that you might not be aware of. If you grab this note and pull it away, you do what's it's what's called tearing off, and you're actually allowed to then have this pop-up window be its own independent individual window. And so when I'm in here, then you'll see now I'm going to click Attributes. And here are all of the system level attributes. You have AI attributes and agent attributes and appearance attributes and composite attributes and events attributes and general attributes, and the list goes on and on and on. There are hundreds of system attributes. Some of these attributes are read-only. A lot of these attributes can be adjusted, managed, and interacted with. So let me give you an example of what we call an appearance attribute. So here you see there are all of the different ways I can modify the appearance of a note. Accent color, badge, badge monochrome, etc. Most of this you can do while applying on a note. So for example, check this out. If I go ahead here and I click on and I'm going to pull this down a little bit so we can see this. If I click on the little plus button here right on the top right side of a note and I click here, and now watch what's going to happen. I'm going to press this help icon here, and watch what happens to the badge field here. So right now you see the attribute badge is empty. It has no value. But the second I click on that, it takes on the value of help, and guess what? It puts the lifesaver badge on the note. Or if I click on the folder icon, it changes the badge to folder and puts the folder icon on the note. That is a great example of using and applying a value to an attribute. So in this case, the attribute is badge, and we're telling Tinderbox to put in this case, the classic icon folder on this particular folder. So there's an example of applying an attribute. Let me show you another example. Let's say I'm on this company here and I right mouse click and I want to change the shape of this note. So I click lozenge. It's now changed the shape of this note. And if I go and look for the shape attribute for this particular note, let's go ahead and hit shape. And you probably have to refresh Tinderbox. Yeah, let's close this window and we're going to get info for this note in particular. So we're going to go here and we're going to type shape. Okay, we'll do it this way. And you'll see it says lozenge. So again, an attribute is a tool, a means, and a mechanism that Tinderbox uses to tell you what to do with notes. So again, this note is the lozenge shape. And it also, too, I can go in here, and if I want to, I can change the color, right? And again, the color changes, and so then the note changes. So hopefully you're getting that kind of one-for-one association between attributes and notes within your Tinderbox file. Now, you saw in some of the previous lessons, or as you're playing with Tinderbox and you see what other people are doing, up here you see this little icon here. This little icon up here allows you to determine what attributes are displayed. So if I go ahead and type name, if I type badge, if I type color, all I'm doing here is telling Tinderbox to tell me what attributes I want displayed when I'm looking at the note in a particular field. So in this regard, I've said, okay, let me display the color, the attribute color. So now I can come in and pick any of the different colors that I want to be able to use and apply to that note. And so you see, as I'm changing the color, I can do it from here. Similarly, I can come in and I can select any of the existing badges that are available within Tinderbox. So I can do the folder, or maybe if I want to go back and I want to do the help, I can type help, and that will apply the help badge there. So again, you can see how we can start applying any number of the different elements and aspects of applying attributes and using attributes within Tinderbox. So we're going to get into a lot more depth into this when we get into other types of notes. For example, as we saw in a previous lesson on creating prototypes, I'm going to go ahead in here and install a prototype, and we'll install places. And while I'm at it, I'm just going to install a few of the other prototypes as well. This time we'll install events. And we'll also go ahead and put the person prototype in. So now if I pop into these notes, what you're essentially seeing here is I have an event prototype that is set to show these attributes in its display window. You'll also see that it's been set to show a clock as the badge, and it's been set to this color. Likewise, the system attributes within prototype this prototype have been set to green with the purple badge and a lozenge shape. So again, system prototypes are really, really powerful. They both are functional for Tinderbox to be able to know what to do, but they're also kind of standard. So for example, there are just some basic attributes that are considered system attributes because they're just so obvious that they need to be there. Like for a person, you might want to have a name or an organization or an address or an email address, etc. So that's the first kind of set of attributes, both system attributes that are functionally used by Tinderbox to do what Tinderbox does, and system attributes that are there with no value in them whatsoever, but they're just so commonly used that the Eastgate team has put them already kind of predefined within the Tinderbox solution. Now here's where things get really exciting, and when you talk about the idea of content creation, note creation, and really digging in and creating your concepts and ideas, Tinderbox has this other concept called user level attributes. So let me go ahead here, for example, and I'm going to, as we showed you in previous lessons, we can apply the person prototype. So I'm going to make this note, Michael Becker, the person prototype. And you see, I can put on a whole bunch of information here, like my name, Michael Becker. I could put in my my organization name, Praxis Inc., and such. And so I have information about me in here. Now, what's also kind of interesting in Tinderbox, let's go ahead and create a note about Mark Bernstein. And as we all know, Mark is the CEO, founder, and designer of Tinderbox, and we are all incredibly grateful for his passion and efforts and work he does. And so we're going to go ahead here. Now, what's interesting about this is I'm going to go ahead and just copy and paste and put Mark's name in the value of the full name attribute. And I'm also going to put in his company, Eastgate. Now, this is the fun part about thinking about attributes, and both system and user level attributes work this way. Now, watch what happens here. I'm going to create another name. We'll call this one Mark Anderson. Okay, and I'm going to also give Mark a person level prototype. And let's say Mark works for Eastgate. He does not. He's like me. He's a Tinderbox acolyte. He just loves this tool and wants to help people be able to use it. And that's why he's created the ATP reference that we all adoringly use. But check this out. When Tinderbox is smart enough because it's back-end data structure and how it works, so that when you go and you see this little icon over here, the little caret icon, it will help you it knows all of the values you put in the attribute organization across all of the notes in your file. So if you want to be able to select from that, you can. So let's say Mark works for Eastgate, so I can just go ahead and select that. Or let's say Mark works for another company. Right? And now I pop over to Michael Becker's note and I click here. You're going to now see I have another company, Eastgate, and Identity Praxis. So as you're thinking about this idea of attributes, again, remember, every note has every attribute, and every note has the potential to access the value of every attribute across all of your notes, across your entire file. And though that's what makes the magic of Tinderbox work, and when it comes to knowledge creation, knowledge management, and interaction. And here's another example. This note over here we call Eastgate. Let's go ahead and, sorry, my phone just went off. Let's create another. Let's pick up this note called Eastgate, and as we explained before, I can go ahead and show you that I can just have any note has every attribute associated with it. So if I start typing into the attribute display, it will start looking for attributes that match that name. And since organization is a system level attribute, it already exists. So we're going to go ahead and click there. I'll hit the enter key to make sure that I want it displayed and show it there. So you'll see, even though this note doesn't have a prototype assigned to it, I can display the attribute organization because every note has every attribute associated with it within the Tinderbox file. Likewise, I can pull from that data. So here you go, Eastgate. So later we can talk about the data structure behind the scenes, and if you're interested under the hood to understand how all of this works. But that idea of being able to have this kind of meta information associated with any and all of your notes, and you choosing to determine what you want notes to, what notes you want to be displayed, what attributes you want to have displayed on your notes, and it being totally up to you, is really one of the most powerful things of the Tinderbox solution. But now let me go back to one final point before we're done with this kind of initial introduction to attributes. And I get it, it can be totally overwhelming because this ability to think about the object that is note could really have an infinite number of meta elements, which are called attributes associated with them, that you then later can use to mine and search and gain insight from, is like mind-blowing. And you will have to have many lessons as we go through it. But the one point that I want to emphasize before we're done with this session is this idea of a user-generated attribute. So imagine this. So if I have, let me go, I need to pull up my browser here real quick, and I'm going to go to, let's say I have an individual, and I want to start adding my own data to the system. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this note, go to get info. We're going to tear this off so we can open it up a little bit more as we've explained before. And again, that's a little tip, by the way, that if you pull on any of the pop-ups in Tinderbox, they tear open and become standalone windows. And if we go down to the people system level attribute, you'll see that Mark has contributed email, full name, organization, telephone, Twitter as base level kind of standard attributes that come along associated with the kind of categorical attribute name of people. But there's a lot more information that you might want to know about people. So we can go ahead and create what are called user-generated attributes. And let me show you how to go about doing that. If I'm in the display window and I'm looking here and I now want to type in the word LinkedIn URL. Okay, now Tinderbox didn't recognize this idea of LinkedIn URL because it doesn't exist in the system. It's not a system level attribute. So I'm going to go ahead and type that in and hit the enter key. Okay, now I'm also going to type in mobile phone. Hit the enter key. Okay, now watch what happens. When I click out of this display attributes pop-up menu and click over here, or anywhere on the file for that matter, I'm presented with this window and it says some of these attributes don't exist. Would you like to create them? Well, thank you for asking, Tinderbox. Yes, I would. So I'm going to go ahead and hit create. And so what I'm now doing is in this Tinderbox file, I am creating my first user-generated attributes. And I can also specify what type of attribute I want. Do I want a string attribute, just a long list of ASCII characters? Do I want a number attribute? Do I want a date? Is this an actual date? Is this attribute about colors? Is this attribute a Boolean? And Boolean means yes or no. Is this attribute about a file? Is this a link to a URL, to a file sitting on the hard drive of your computer? Is this a URL that will resolve itself out on the internet? Is this a list? Meaning a list of items separated by semicolons that can have duplicates in it, versus a set, which is a list of items separated by semicolons that cannot have duplicates in it, and an interval, meaning time, basically. So in this regard, if we think about LinkedIn URL, I'm going to go ahead and click URL, and for my mobile phone number, I'll just leave it as a string. That's fine. And as soon as I click away, because these boxes are checked, you'll see that I now have LinkedIn URL and mobile phone as my attributes. So if I now go up to my browser and pull down in my LinkedIn address, I can paste that in here, and you now see that my LinkedIn URL is now here, and I have generated my first user-generated attribute for this solution. Similarly, I can go in here and type in my mobile number, so I can say 408-444, 81, and then I won't finish it because I don't necessarily want to get spammed. And if any of you want to connect with me, I really encourage you to do so by connecting me with at LinkedIn. So let's summarize what we've learned here. What we've learned here is that we have a whole bunch of what are called attributes in Tinderbox. There are system attributes, and as we've just demonstrated, user level attributes. Every note has every attribute associated with it. Attributes have values in them. Those values could be names or other types of text strings or URLs or numbers, or those attributes could be colors or other types of information that Tinderbox will use to do what it does. Now, the one last thing I want to emphasize about attributes is in their association with prototypes. So let's go back here, and you see I have this Michael Becker prototype where I manually added the LinkedIn URL and the mobile phone number to it. Now, if I go here, though, you'll see that in the Mark Bernstein or the Mark Anderson notes, they don't have the that native information or that user-generated information that we have just created, that new attribute. Now, I could go to the display and manually add that, just like, because now that I've created that user level attribute, I can type them in, and I could say linked in, and you'll see LinkedIn's now going to recognize the LinkedIn URL because it's already been generated. But I don't want to do it there. I'm going to go over and do it in the prototype. Oh, by the way, too, you notice how I just didn't do anything and I didn't hit click create, and so by not clicking create, LinkedIn ignored that the generation of that user-generated attribute. Now, if I go here and I go to the person prototype and I go over to the display attributes, so now what I want to be able to do, and again, this is based on the prototype lesson that we just showed before, I'm going to go ahead and type in the word LinkedIn. I'm going to select that attribute. I'm also going to type the attribute mobile phone number, the other user-generated attribute we created, and I'm going to click away. And you'll see that in the prototype, those two elements were added, LinkedIn URL and mobile phone. Well, guess what? Now when we go back to those other notes, you'll notice that, wow, wait a minute. On this note, Mark Bernstein note, LinkedIn URL and mobile phone were automatically added. But for some reason, they didn't happen to the Mark Anderson one. And that's because we started editing the Mark Anderson note earlier. And it's because of this concept of inheritance that we talked about before, it's blocking from any of these changes being made because Tinderbox is we don't want to have Tinderbox overwrite any data. Well, there's ways we can go about resetting the way this works. If I just go up to the display attribute and click the reset button here, you'll see that essentially what we're doing is we're telling Tinderbox to reset the display attributes the display attributes value to match the value of the display attributes of the prototype. And then by doing that, you'll go ahead and see it here. And again, that raises another really interesting observation and question. Let me show you this. If I go ahead and hit display, and you'll see here, displayed attributes. Guess what? The attributes that are being displayed here in this list are, as you would expect now that you understand attributes, just another attribute. So essentially, this attribute is telling Tinderbox to display these attributes in their notes. So for example, and if I go in here and I delete these first two, what do you think is going to happen? I'm going to delete the values of displayed attributes here, and voila, they're gone. So that's a really interesting way. And then if I want to put them back, I can either manually put them back, because you saw me do that. I can go ahead and put the organization one manually back, and it shows up down on the list. Or I can, as we were just showing, hit reset, and it will reset itself to be just like the prototype. Now, the one other thing I want to emphasize as we're talking about attributes and I'm showing you how to use them, and right now we're just talking about the mechanics, not the strategy of attributes and how they all work. But here's one of the most important things that you need to remember when managing and using attributes in Tinderbox. Don't be afraid. You really can't break anything that is not recoverable. So, for example, create as many attributes as you want, and later we can teach you how to merge attributes and get your data all together into one place and make edits and such. So at this point, when you're first getting started, play with them, create them, use them, break things, and have a good time with it. The other thing to remember too is if you're looking at a file and if I want to delete an attribute from its view, I can just hit the delete key, right? This is not deleting the information. So if I go up here and hit delete the organization attribute, that's not deleting the information. It's only deleting it from the display. If I go back and add that attribute back in, you'll select this, you'll see, voila, it's still there and the information's there. No information's been lost. It's just determining how you want it displayed. So this is the lesson, a high level and a vastly underrepresented power of attributes within the Tinderbox system. My goal here with this lesson was to be able to show you where to find attributes, how to turn attributes on and off, how to edit them and the values of them, etc. The one other place is I'm going to hit Command 1 on my computer now to open up the document inspector, and just so you can see here too, another place for you to be able to easily manage and manipulate and use your attributes is here, where I can now go and see all of the system attributes that are within the solution and play with those. And if I want to see my user level, my user attributes, here you can see the attributes that we've created, and you can also create attributes from here as well. So for instance, let's say I want to go and create a new user level attribute in this program, and let's call this one my, we'll call it TBX handle. Okay, so this for me, it can be anything you want. I'm going to leave this as a string. TBX handle for me, what this user generated attribute means is the username that people use within the Tinderbox forum. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the enter key. That's critical. So at this stage, when you're creating that new user generated attribute, you type in the name you want, you hit the enter key. Now if I go back to a note, and let's do that. We'll go back to the prototype notes. We'll go over here to attributes. And we'll now type that attribute that we just created. We'll call it TBX handle. There it is in the list. It's added to the system. If I go back to the other notes, you'll now, and again, as we've talked about it, we need to have them inherit that change that we've made to the prototypes because we don't want them to necessarily get overwriting any other data. And so now again, we can have the notes inherit. And now we can go ahead and add value here. So for me, my attribute is Sati Kusala. For Mark, it's MWA. And for Mark Bernstein, it is Eastgate. Okay, and so you've now seen that our ability to create user-generated attributes, populate the information in those attributes, and add attributes, the different places within Tinderbox you can use to manage attributes, etc. Now, in the next lesson, we'll talk about what you do with those, and that lesson is going to be all about action codes. But for now, just wanted to give you a brief introduction to attributes. So thank you.